Okay, well, welcome everybody to the Austin Tableau user group. My name is Chris Monahan. I'll be your MC today. We got a great event planned for you. We have some great speakers and also a good discussion going on as well. So before we get started, I always like to kick things off by thanking those members that are part of our advisory council. These are the folks that help put together this event each and every month. They do everything from planning the speakers, arranging the marketing, and getting the event invites out. So thank you to everyone that helped put this together. We always like to invite those of you in the community come join our advisory council. So if you're in the Austin area and you have a particular skill in marketing or maybe event planning or just like networking in general, please come reach out to one of us, myself, and we'd be happy to put you in touch and tell you a little bit more about how our advisory council works. We meet every other week on a virtual call and do all the planning. And then once a quarter, we have a nice team dinner as well. So if you are interested in joining the team, please let me know. All right, so here's our agenda for today. We're going to do a couple quick announcements, talk a little bit about our meeting format and do a little bit of housekeeping. And then we have our featured speaker today, which is Jared Flores. He is a friend of the Austin Tug, former advisory council member as well. And Jared is a Tableau visionary and social ambassador, and he's going to do a great presentation called From the Warehouse to the Data Warehouse. So you definitely don't want to miss that. And then at the end, we're going to do our networking breakout session. Ask anyone anything Tableau. Kate and I will be moderating that as well. So stick around at the end, and we'll have an opportunity for you guys to network and ask some more questions about Tableau. So as a reminder, this is a live meeting, so please observe customary Zoom etiquette. Please be on mute, but we do ask you guys, if you get a chance, to go ahead and be on video, because we like to see everybody's faces, and also participate in the chat window. You go ahead and put comments or ask any questions there. Now, if you do have questions for our speaker, we're going to have a Q&A at the end there, but feel free to direct message Kate, and she's going to collect all the questions, and we'll ask those at the end. We'll also be sending out a link to do a short survey. We like to go ahead and make this event, take feedback from you guys, so we can always improve these events. So look for that as well. A little bit of housekeeping. So I'm excited that, although it is our last Tug official presentation Tug of the year, we do have one more event, and that's going to be our December holiday happy hour. It's going to be very, very fun. It's going to be at Lala's Little Nugget here in Austin. So if you're in the Austin area, please come join us. It'll be December 7th, 5 o'clock through 5 to 7. And it's just going to be a free happy hour, time for us to get together and just network and chat a little bit about data. So if you're in the Austin area, definitely join us. And then we will be back in January with another virtual event. So also, we like to remind everyone that we have a Slack community. So if you're interested in joining our Slack community, Nicole will go ahead and put a link in the chat right now where you guys can come and join. There's a lot of chatter there. We talk a little bit about just community events. If you have questions about Tableau in general, you can post those there too. So definitely join our Slack community. So with that, I'd like to introduce our featured speaker, Jared Flores. As I mentioned, he's a Tableau visionary and social ambassador, and he is a consulting leader at Analytic Vision and co-owner of the Not Rocket Science. And so if you have not checked out Jared's blog, it's put some prep in your step. I highly recommend it. It's a great blog. Definitely check it out. So with that, Jared, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, always happy to be here and present all things prep. Like Chris mentioned, I am in consulting right now with Analytic Vision. Also just recently started some web application development with Luke Stanky, formerly of PH Data. So a lot of exciting things in the works. But what I'm here to talk to y'all about today is the story of how I got here, because it's definitely unconventional and to me, it's very ironic that I started working in warehouses, and now my day-to-day consists of cloud data warehouses. And honestly, the physical structure of both is why it kind of clicks for me. And so I just wanted to go through all of that, what I used to do, how it translated, how I decided to pick up the skills, um, and where it's led. So let me share my screen real quick. All right. So I'll start with just a little bit of background on the way my mind works and my curiosity works. So when I was younger, um, it was, Apple was advancing. You had the iPhone come out, you had the iPods and all the iterations of the iPods. They looked super different every year. And just, I was a big fan of music. I play guitar and I also produce music. So I was always very interested in all things musical, not just the sounds, but also like the technology. And so what I used to do every time a new iPod came out is I would do exactly this, is I would take it apart and try to figure out how it was built. Just curious, like this thing has a screen and I twirl my thumb around the circle and I get to choose my music, but like what's behind it all? And I would always do this. And then once I got here, I didn't really understand any of it, but it was just trying to see like how does the physical nature of this device actually translate into something digital. Never really, again, never really got much understanding out of it, but it was just kind of the way my curiosity was working. I was always trying to take things apart and figure out how they worked. So that's just some context that you need about the way I kind of think about things going into this. Now, when I was in school, when I was in high school, I thought what I wanted to do was be a mechanical engineer. And I don't really know why. I don't know why I landed on that. I think maybe one of the reasons for it is it's just something that kind of sticks in our heads here, specifically in the area that I grew up. There's a pretty large facility for Lockheed Martin here. There's a large facility for Bell Helicopter here. And so it's just kind of one of the things that, you live here and forever, you probably end up doing something with them. And so I think that's why I landed on mechanical engineering. And most of my life going through school, school was kind of easy for me. But the problem was I was lazy. I didn't do my work. I didn't like to do my work. Didn't like to study. I think my biggest challenge, or the subject I had the biggest challenge with, was history, government, just because it wasn't math. And so it required a bit of studying, and I didn't have the mental willpower to force myself into doing those things. So as I got older and started getting closer to graduation, I didn't do so great on my schoolwork, but I mean, I still had decent grades, decent enough to get into college and start. And I also graduated a year early. But when I think back about that, like graduating early, I think for me, that was one of my biggest mistakes, because what happened is I got to college, and I was going to college like here at UT Arlington, and I didn't have my friends. I didn't have anybody there. And so I was just kind of going by myself every day. And I was also very antisocial, very introverted. And so I didn't try to make new friends. And so that first semester there, I thought it was going to be easier for me to like focus on school and actually be more like rigorous with my schedule and be more dedicated to work. But the opposite ended up happening, where there was no accountability for me. If I didn't show up, nobody knew I didn't show up. If my parents were, they were working. And so like, if I just stayed home and skipped class, nobody would notice. And so that first semester, that's exactly what happened. I had a full-time course load, and about 2 months into the semester, I just stopped going. and just being lazy, not really doing anything. The next semester, I was like, okay, I can't do that again. I got to get it together. I have to do this. This is important. And so the next semester, I re-enrolled, and did the same exact thing. I went for about 2 months and then I just stopped. And I did that for maybe for about 2 years, actually. I just kept enrolling and then stopped and going. And the worst part of it is I didn't even drop out. I just stopped going. And so at the end of that 2 years, I had a transcript of tons of F's. And I was like, well, I screwed it up. I don't really know what I'm supposed to do now. And I was just, making a lot of bad choices, just not really focused on the future. Like, what am I actually going to do with my life? What does the future look like? What do I do now that I'm not in school? And eventually, once I actually was like, came to the realization, okay, I have to go work. If I'm not going to go to school, I have to go work. But, what kind of job do I get? I tried food service, hated it. It's horrible. Every food service job I had lasted about like 2 weeks. I was like, I just want my paycheck and I'm out because this is terrible. And I ended up with my first sort of back, not customer facing job at Pep Boys, stocking tires. And sounded like, for me, an ideal job. Show up super early. You don't have to interact with customers. You just put stuff on shelves all day, and then you go home at 2 p.m. because you have the early shift. And so that was kind of where my retail inventory career started. And it also didn't last very long. I mean, it was a year or the 2 years after high school. So I worked at Pep Boys for a couple of months. The worst part of it being that it's they get tires in every day. You don't realize it when you see a shop like that, how many tires they go through, but every morning at 5 a.m., it was a full truck of tires that we were stocking on racks that looked just like this. And so they had like some ladders, and we had to haul the tires up on our shoulder and carry them up. And it was very physically demanding, but I think it didn't require me to interact with customers. And so to me, I was able to just go in, do my job, go home. I just got to the point where it was like, this is just, I don't really see where I go from here. Like I don't know what this looks like long term. And so at the time, being into music, I was also, because I wasn't going to school and didn't really have a lot going on, I spent most of my time that I was not working making music, learning how to produce music. That was around the time that EDM was super popular. I thought I was going to be a famous DJ. And so I poured all of my time into that. And so I was like, you know what? If this is what I'm doing, and my job doesn't pay really great, why don't I go work at Guitar Center? Because at least then I'm surrounded by music. I can still do what I'm doing at work every day, but also I get the super, super discounts on all of the musical stuff that I need. And so I started working at Guitar Center, and I loved it. I loved the people there. I loved the job, and the job was really simple. It was kind of the same. Every morning, a truck would show up. It would drop off guitars and DJ equipment and software and all of the stuff. And my job was to scan it into their system. And, it's crazy because that wasn't that long ago. And even then, the computer that we were scanning it into was it's like one of those 90s green screens. It wasn't a custom system or anything. We were scanning it into a little green screen with text on it. And so, yeah, just going through the motions there of unloading the truck, scanning in all of the stuff. Every other day was an inventory count. So literally going across the store and physically counting everything. And one day it was guitar strings and like guitar accessories. The next day it was DJ equipment. The next day it was physical guitar or guitars themselves. And so each day we were counting a different item, and just kind of learning that whole process in the retail side. And I think um, I I don't know if I would have changed what I was doing if I hadn't had an opportunity just kind of fall into my lap. Because, like I said, I loved the job. I loved the people there. It wasn't glamorous, but I had a boss there who he was uh, like definition of 80s metalhead, super long hair in a ponytail, always playing heavy metal on our speakers that we had in the warehouse. And he just had a way of, even when there was just some of those days where we all kind of realized this isn't the greatest job and it doesn't have a lot of upside long term. He still had a way of making us see the joy in the day to day and just having fun with it for as long as we were there. And it did get to a point where they started talking to me about kind of moving up into having more responsibilities, getting a promotion there. And at that same time, my cousin just happened to be working at IBM. He was like, "Hey, we have some openings in our warehouse. And I know that's kind of what you do right now. And wanted to see if maybe you want to come over here because it's, uh, the same type of work, but it pays more because it's for IBM. And also you get to have that as something that like now you've worked for a big company." And so I went back and forth on that for a while. Ultimately decided to go and start working at IBM because I just thought like, again, at the time I didn't see myself going back to school. And I really started thinking like, how am I going to set myself up in the future? Because I love my boss and I love this job, but also my boss has worked here for 20 years. And he makes it well known that like, even though he loves the job, it doesn't pay great. It doesn't have great benefits. And it's the type of place where you wouldn't want to be there that long if you had a better option. And so weighing that, I did decide to go over to IBM, where it was still stocking and receiving shipments, but on a much larger scale. So at Guitar Center, it was just guitars and equipment, things that you can mostly lift by yourself in boxes. At IBM, it was data center equipment. And so when I went over to IBM, it was not IBM at the time. It was a company called SoftLayer. SoftLayer was a company founded in Dallas, and it was a cloud data center company. And at the time when it was SoftLayer, they were a big deal. It was when cloud was becoming, what it is today, everything being put to the cloud, moving to the cloud. And so SoftLayer was right up there with AWS and Microsoft. In fact, that's one of the reasons why IBM bought it, because IBM wanted to compete in the cloud game, and SoftLayer's name was up there with Amazon. And so that was kind of IBM's entry into the cloud, into integrating themselves into all of the data centers that SoftLayer already had. But because they had acquired SoftLayer, they had basically injected all of this cash into it, and their first priority was expansion. So the warehouse that I was working in was the hub for all of IBM's data center expansions globally. So in the time that I was there, IBM built about 40 new data centers around the world. And every single piece of equipment that it took to build those data centers came through the warehouse I was at. And I'm talking about from the servers that you see here. So the servers themselves, the racks that the servers go on, and even the wires that all of the networking cables that network them all together. Every single piece of equipment that it takes to build an IBM data center came through this warehouse. And so that was, just being able to be a part of that and see what that looked like was definitely a new experience for me. But it was also kind of full throttle the whole time, all day, every day, because they wanted to expand so fast, because each of these expansions had so much equipment. We were receiving at any one time, we probably had anywhere from 4 to 8 expansions going on at the same time. Each expansion probably took about, depending on the customer commitments in the area, we could be talking about 1,000 servers just at the start per expansion. And so a server rack, one rack of servers, usually holds about 20 servers. And so just the amount of racking equipment and server equipment that we were receiving on a daily basis was just tons and tons of truckloads. And the interesting thing to me was, the longer that I was there, was, this is IBM. This is a company that has been on the forefront of technology. And the way that we were receiving this equipment and scanning it into our system just didn't make sense to me. And just to give you an idea of exactly what we had to scan into the system, so a truck would come in, drop off one of these pallets here, and it'd have all of those servers on it. And what we would have to do is cut it open, scan the actual serial number of the server itself, open it up, and scan in every single component that was part of that server. So like all the processor, all of the sticks of RAM, the networking equipment, every single piece that had a tag on it, we would have to scan into our inventory system. But what we were doing is taking our scan gun. We had a little laptop that we would carry around, take it on our scan gun, and we would open up Excel. And we would scan them all into Excel. And once we had scanned them all into Excel, then we would go and sit at our desks and copy and paste one by one into our inventory system. And when you're doing that for hundreds of servers a day, it is a very, like, not only is it physically demanding to lift the servers and kind of move and all of that, but then you have to sit there kind of mindlessly enter all of this into the system. And, again, I mean, we're talking about tons and tons of equipment. This is one room in a data center. And you see all of those racks there, and then all of the servers that you see there, all of the cables that you see there. This is just one server room. And when an expansion was launching, it was typically launching with 2 to 3 server rooms. And so it was like this pressure of get it all in the door, get it all in the system, but then you've got to repackage it all up and ship it out to wherever it's going. And the longer we did that, the more I was like, there's got to be some way to make this process better. Like, it can't be this. There's no way that this is the best and most efficient way to do this. And so that's when I started kind of thinking about automation, right? It's like, okay, we're using Excel. At the time, I had a very basic knowledge of Excel, but I just started like looking into it. Like, what are ways that you can automate Excel, that we can maybe scan? Yeah, I know we still have to physically scan it. Like, we can't get around that, but maybe we could scan it, and then instead of pasting it in our system, programmatically integrate it into our inventory system. So I started looking into VBA and trying to automate it via VBA and integrate it into our system. And I did this by going to my local half price books and picking up a book on VBA and just reading, like, okay, let me open this up. And I would get my computer and get it and just start going page by page and figure out, like, what is VBA? How does this work? And it's kind of started making these things click of just how data interacts and moves from one system to another. But going back to that image of the iPod broken apart, what this really started doing for me is it helped me see how something physical gets transformed into something digital, moves around, and becomes a piece of information that's useful. So, for example, I scan a stick of RAM. I know that stick of RAM is going to go into this server. And so when I input this into our inventory system, I get to see in our inventory system, hey, it says this stick of RAM is in server 123 in room 3. And so I physically put that in there and put it in that room. And so I know where that is, but I also understand what this screen is telling me and how that translates. And I'm a very visual thinker. And so what that helped me do is actually like visualize when I see how many servers do we have in one place, like visualize in my head what that looks like. When I think about how many sticks of RAM are in a room, how many of those are installed versus not installed, where are they installed? It just kind of helped me that process of like picking apart something, figuring out how it's built, but then putting it back together, and seeing that movement of data. Once I built this, figured out something that kind of worked for automating our procedures. I started using it. I started having other folks on the team use it, and management caught wind of it. And the director of our inventory group at the time wanted to kind of learn more about what we were doing. And what he saw was, at least what he told me at the time was that he saw the spark. He saw where my head was going, and he wanted to help refine it. And so he started mentoring me a lot, and he could definitely see all of the roughness around the edges of me trying to build something, kind of learning what it is as I'm building it, and kind of helped me learn a lot of lessons that would have taken longer if he hadn't been there to guide me. And he had that kind of mindset of like, I already know what problem you're trying to solve. I already know all of the ways that you're going to try to solve it the wrong way. Let me just help you get there faster. And so because of that, that kind of helped me move up pretty quickly to where I was, just somebody who worked in the warehouse, to then eventually I was leading the warehouse. And because I was really good with VBA and just kind of using it more and more every day, then it became hey, since you were able to automate the inventory process, we have a bunch of Excel sheets that we actually use. Like our executive leadership looks at this Excel sheet to determine if one of our expansions is going to make it on time, what has been delivered, what's outstanding, which vendors do we need to follow up with. Do you think you can use some of your VBA to automate some of that? So then I started actually working with project management teams on taking the sheets, integrating them with what we were actually receiving. So instead of us having to have this kind of long chain of, hey, we got this stuff in and we can mark this done, as soon as we would scan it in, there was, purchase orders associated with everything. Those purchase orders were also in our expansion planning sheet. And so it was just this full automation of, as soon as we got it in the door, it was on our expansion sheet. Leadership knew, hey, this stuff has come in. So it was just more quickness to communication. And I didn't realize it at the time, but it was just helping me. It was like those initial reps of like a data pipeline, right? And some type of data engineering. And did that for a while. After doing that for a while, I finally got moved up to where instead of just managing the warehouse, I started to manage the warehouse and additional data center teams around the US. So I was managing the warehouse, managing some data centers in California, in DC, in Seattle, and in Toronto and Montreal. And so a lot of places, and started traveling all over the place and seeing how do different inventory teams work, and how does, when I ship these servers off, what does that actually look like when they land somewhere else and get installed? And then, because we had started tightening up our inventory processes and we were expanding to so many places at once, a big concern became the actual like inventory security of the inventory. We started running into theft. We started running into, when we shipped stuff off to an expansion, they would build 99% of the room and then be like, oh, wait, we actually never got, these cables that we need, something like that. And so then we were asked to figure out how to do better auditing of our inventory, because our auditing at the time was just, we would print off a little piece of paper that said how many sticks of RAM we were supposed to have in a room, and we would go walk down to the room and go count it. And so, obviously, not only was that just a flawed process because we're kind of handwriting it all down, but it's also easy to manipulate those results, right? And so was my introduction to sort of database management and SQL, because our answer to building something that was more automated, that was more secure, that was based on serial numbers instead of us counting something, was to build a inventory tracking tool inside of Access. And it looked pretty similar to this, where we had kind of one master copy that my boss and I had built. And so then somebody could open it up, go and scan a serial number. And when they scanned it, it would pop up in here. It would then use SQL to check back against our inventory system and verify, does this serial number exist in our system? If it does, this is the room that we scanned it in. Is this the room that it's supposed to be in? And so what this also helped us do is sometimes we would go and find a processor, we would scan it, and when it checked back against the inventory system, our system would say, hey, this processor is, according to our system, installed it in a server that's in a data center 3 states away. So it helped us fine tune that process. But for me, it was like just building something from the ground up. It was using SQL. It was using database architecture. And so I started to understand that a little bit more. I mean, there was still like VBA involved and some sort of development, like customized tool development involved in that. But ultimately, it just started making me see more and more like how important data was, right? Because once we had the tool and we could scan everything and it verified everything against the system, the next step was, well, what are the results? And so when we got to the point where now we need to analyze our results, we need to do it at scale. We need to figure out how efficient we are. That's when I was introduced to Tableau and data visualization and trying to piece all these things together. And it was just super interesting again, because it's like I'm looking at a Tableau report of our inventory accuracy in a location. And again, I can like physically trace back or mentally trace back all of these things in my head of we got it in on this shipment. It was then installed in this server. It was then put in this room. And here's what it ends up looking like in a dashboard, which is something completely different. And so, yeah, I started learning Tableau and visualization. And I mean, my initial reports were very rough. But because I was learning Tableau as something that was not necessarily a function of my role, I got really sucked into it really quickly, to the point where it was like, hey, maybe managing the teams and the inventory teams is not kind of where you want to focus. Maybe it's, something different. Maybe you want to start actually spending your time and your focus on analyzing the data. And we had done a big, massive reorganization. The inventory team had kind of gotten merged into like the data center team. So with the folks who actually go and manage the servers and troubleshoot the servers, so the inventory team kind of disappeared. And when that happened, that was an opportunity for me to just completely switch my career path. Because at the time it was all inventory focused, supply chain focused. And then it just switched to now I'm analyzing the data because I helped build all the tools that we're using to track everything. And now I get to just really focus on analyzing it and maybe making decisions off of it and doing something different with it. One of the initial pieces of analysis that I would do, which I found super interesting. And when you think about cloud architecture, it's interesting how many pieces of it that you wouldn't even realize have to be managed. So, for example, you've got a physical data center that has your servers that are running your cloud, right? But it's not as simple as, well, how many servers fit in that room? So how can we maximize the compute in that room? It also depends on how much power that room has available. And so when we would build, or when a data center room gets built, the floor plan looks something like this. You've got it broken up into zones, or what we would call pods. And so you have a room. That room has a certain maximum capacity of electricity that it can supply to that room. And it also, because that power needs to be distributed evenly across all of the power blocks in that room, you also have to be consistent or conscious of how much power is being supplied to one zone or one pod at any given time. And so it's not like I can just say, I've got full capacity, so I'm going to put 100% of my power here, and I'm not going to install anything down here. No, you have to distribute it physically to make sure that you've got an even distribution of power going to each of these zones. And the way that we would measure that is, not every some of the newer data centers had that all like built in. Like when the data center was built, we had an agreement with the facility that they would supply us with readouts of like, hey, here's your percentage of power utilization in the room, and here's what it looks like across each of those pods. But for some of the older ones, that wasn't something that they had available. So what we would have to do is actually determine, okay, we know that the power strip that runs to this block of servers is a 1,000 megawatt power block or power strip. And then we know that each of the servers installed on those racks has a power block that uses 400 watts or 600 watts. And it's also powered on. But not all 600 watts that server can consume are going to be used at one time. That depends on the individual components that are installed in it. And so we would do all of these mathematics to basically determine how much power is one server using. And so if I know how much power one server is using, I've got this many servers installed and turned on that power strip. So how much electrical capacity do I actually have in that power strip? And we would have to keep constant eyes on that, because if the power strip goes down, every single server in that row goes down. And because when SoftLayer was being built, a lot of the way that SoftLayer built their business was by catering to the smaller businesses. So it wasn't just like, oh, this is just going to turn off somebody's on Tableau instance for a little bit. It's like, no, that could be affecting hundreds of customers if one row of servers goes down. So creating like reports and analysis in Tableau of like, here's the electrical and physical capacity that we have in each of these rooms, and where we can install servers, where we need to go and maybe migrate servers to a different location because we're kind of overutilizing our power. A lot of really interesting ways to kind of utilize the data. And so it just helped me love data more and more. And I wanted to get better at Tableau. And so at a certain point, I kind of started looking into the Tableau community a little bit. Things that IBM had also kind of slowed down a bit to where kind of wasn't really sure what the future looked like there. And so just kind of started looking around and trying to figure out, like, I want to learn more about Tableau. I want to keep doing things with Tableau, but I think I might have to do that elsewhere. So I started looking around. Eventually I landed at Brinks, where I had a really unique opportunity where they were like, hey, we're just kind of like we have Tableau and we have stuff there, but we haven't really built it. So it was a good way to go in and help them build from the ground up what their actual enterprise Tableau environment looked like. And when I was there, I decided to go ahead and jump into the Tableau community. That's when I joined Twitter, and I started following everybody that had Tableau somewhere mentioned on their profile. And that first week that I joined, I did my first Makeover Monday, and this was what it was. This is my first Makeover Monday, my first contribution to the public sphere. And it's not, to me, even looking back on it, I don't think it's bad, but it's also not like it doesn't look like the things I do today. It was just, trying to put something out there, trying to get feedback on it. And I think the feedback and the welcoming that I got in the community was just awesome. It helped me see what the community is, how it's different. And, actually, I think I was on Twitter for maybe 2 weeks, and I had put something out there, and the first person that ever reached out to me on Twitter was actually Kevin Flores. And I think at the time I mean, I had like, I don't know, like 10 followers or something. And it just made me realize like, oh, this is not like, it's not a who's who. It's, hey, it's one community and we want everybody to be better. Um, and so that to me was really awesome. It just gave me more encouragement to step into it, to keep trying, to keep improving, to keep asking for feedback to anybody who would give it. And so, I went from this being my first visualization to this being the kind of stuff that I do now. Um, and it's just, to me, it's such a crazy thing to think about, like where my life was, where it was going, where it's ended up. um to you know I I never imagined something like this, and honestly a lot of what you see even here, it's just all inspiration. I see other people doing great stuff, and again, I see something great, I go and download it and I pick it apart and I try to figure out how was this built and how can I put it back together. And so that curiosity is what has always kind of driven um, how I get better, how I learn. And also, the other thing that drives how I learn is my bookshelf. So, this right here is every single book that I've read since I started with the VBA, except actually, my VBA book is not on this bookshelf. It's hidden in a box somewhere. But these are all of the books that I've read to absorb the knowledge and to do what I do. And yes, even like these giant Python and SQL books. Yes, the way I learned is by opening it up, starting at page one and opening my computer and following along. It's definitely a much more tedious way to go about learning it. But I did it. And to me, it's just, there's never enough. I can always learn more and more. A lot of these books, some of them are the kind of the same concept. There's fundamentals of data visualization. There is visual display of quantitative information. There's the functional art, it's just all of these books that kind of tell you the same thing, but in a different way, because I want to learn the different perspectives and continue to grow. And part of that learning, part of having somebody who took a chance on me, helped level up my career and get me to a place where I never would have been if they hadn't taken a chance on me. I wanted to do that in some way. And that's why I started the Put Some Prep in Your Step and my YouTube channel, and trying to give back in some way and do more. And I think the last thing that I expected to happen was to be recognized as a visionary for the things that I do in the prep space. Because I think there are a lot of people who do great things in the Tableau space. But that was, to me, I mean, I think for everyone who's in that category, it's very meaningful. It's very impactful. It's a big deal. But for me, it was like, to me, it's my badge of honor of like, I didn't do well in school. That's the one thing that I failed very miraculously at. And so this is, I had to kind of claw my way into a place of, yeah, I don't have a degree, but there's people out there who see value in what I do and what I know. And so to me, that's it's been really important. And funnily enough, I did actually end up going back to school. And when I started, I had, oh man, I had 18 Fs. And can happily say I have gone back and retaken every one of those classes, and I now have a 4.0. And I am 9 credits away from my associates. It's taken me a long time because I had to kind of go back and do a couple of semesters over again, but I'm getting there slowly but surely. Not because I need to. This was just more of a, okay, I have to prove to myself that I actually can do it, that I was just lazy back then, and this is something I can go and do and something I can succeed at. And just what's even more amazing to me is like the opportunities that have come from my story, from how I got here, because for the past year and a half, I've taught with Emory University. They had a program with women in technology where they do a full IT fundamentals course that includes Power BI, Tableau, Python, SQL. Like, it includes all of that. And so I teach the Tableau portion. And it is a program that is specifically catered towards single mothers who are low income. And the purpose of it is the course is provided at a very low cost with the goal of helping them get what they consider to be a life-changing job. And they base that off of a salary of 60,000 or more a year. That's what they categorize as life-changing. And then that's the whole purpose of the program. Get these women in, provide what they need, the equipment, childcare, everything that they need to take this course. And then hopefully at the end of it, actually land them and place them in a job. And when I talked to Emory, the reason that they said they wanted me is because I didn't have a degree. They said, we want you to show that just because they're taking this course, if they're changing a career, or maybe they're older, or, they never went to school, that doesn't mean that they can't have success. So that was another, that helped me kind of get over the imposter syndrome that I used to have of like, there's still value in what I can do and what I can provide. So that's also been just, like I said, when I think about it and look at the things that I get to do and the path that I took to get here, it's crazy. And even now, building my own app with another Tableau visionary that does things on top of Tableau because, again, my curiosity to take it apart, figure out what's going on behind the scenes, and put it back together in a different way. And so that's been cool to take things like Tableau desktop and create a bulk editing tool out of it, or take things like Tableau prep and figure out a way to convert your prep flow into SQL. These are things that I never saw myself doing, but also that experience that I got of building things, custom things in Excel, and building things in Access, and just taking things apart and figuring out what the structure is underneath everything. It's been a journey. So yeah, that's my story of starting in the warehouse, now being in the data warehouses all day, every day, and maybe one day off to bigger and better things. So this is the first time that I've actually gotten to like lay out in detail what that journey actually looked like. And like I said, as far as like how I did it, this right here, this is how I did it. A lot of free time, a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of just trying to find that mental willpower to absorb the information. And so, yeah, that's what I got for y'all. Very happy that y'all let me tell my story.
Well, thank you, Jared. That was an amazing story, and thank you for sharing your journey. I I want to congratulate you first for being a Tableau visionary, and also for going back and doing your degree, but also just that amazing work you're doing with those women at Emory. That's really giving back. So that's just amazing. What I found interesting about your story was that you always, along the way, at every job you always had that, like you said, that curiosity, and look for the opportunity to find a better process, automate it, and that's sort of just open doors to new things. And so I think that's something definitely everybody could take to heart, as we're all in our own careers. I guess one question I did have, for those that are maybe in a job right now, right? What sort of things should they be considering if they're going, maybe an opportunity does present itself? Like, how do you go about weighing, what you currently have versus, what sort of things went through your mind as you're looking to switch roles?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that went through my mind was like, let's say I stay. I always start it with, instead of thinking about like what could be if I change, it's if I stay here, what does the long term look like? And I think there's a factor of like, what is your relationship with your coworkers, with your management? There's some level at most places of like quarterly or annual reviews. Have like, what have those looked like? And I think the biggest thing has also been have they always done what they said they were going to do? Um, that was usually how I weighed each of the times that I made a transition. And like I said, with Guitar Center, it was, yeah, I think this is a place that I could be here and have fun every day for 20 years. But what about when I get married? What about when I have kids? And um, my boss didn't always show it, but there was like a sort of a visible struggle of like it doesn't fully cut it. And when I was making the change from IBM, it was, yeah, it's IBM, it's a big name, they've got great benefits and they've got all this stuff, but it was also a weird period where the future didn't feel like it felt like I was either going to be part of some um you know downsizing because of an org restructure, or I was going to be in the same exact role for 10, 15 years with no room to grow. And I wanted a different opportunity. That's the other thing for me that I've come to realize is not for everyone. There are times where it's like, I'm at where I'm at, it's a good job, it's steady, it's the future looks steady, and I'm comfortable, and that's awesome. For me, it has always been, I just feel like there's something better. I feel like there's something more. I want to continue to grow and grow and grow and grow. And so sometimes that's been a disadvantage for me because it makes me a little impatient sometimes. But that's just always been my mindset of how can I continue to grow and continue to do more and continue to um, have an impact. I think that's the biggest thing for me is impact as well. Like what today, if I stay in my role today, what impact am I having? And if I go to this new role that I have an opportunity for, do I have a chance to have a bigger impact? Do I get to impact people I'm working with and help them go on to the next thing they want to do? Or is it like who I'm actually serving that I'm having an impact on? So I think weighing all of those different things can definitely help make the decision.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, of course, a lot of people lead with like monetary reasons. Of course, they want to switch jobs, which is important by all means. But yeah, I do agree with you. Those things are very important long term and being happy in what you do too. So, I guess Kate, let me open. Were there any questions from the audience there, or do you have any
Yeah,
questions?
I don't see any in the chat currently, but if folks have some, by all means, please, please, please put them in the chat. But I did have a couple questions for you, Jared, if you don't mind. So the first question is, I really appreciate you keeping half price books in business with this collection. So I love that. Out of like, just from your perspective, obviously, like reading in these like books and resources were really helpful for you. Thinking about it now, if you were to like try and pick up a new technology or product or skill set, is there anything else that you would add in terms of your learning process to help with that?
I think like definitely all of the, for whatever tool it may be, whatever the uh, community challenges are out there. I think there's a lot of people who become experts in whatever tool they're using. There's communities out there for everything. And so, things like Makeover Monday, Workout Wednesday, Prep and Data, things like that help you apply it, because learning without application um, isn't effective. So I think the biggest thing is however you're learning, whether it's books, videos, blogs, you have to apply it. So finding some way that helps you apply that, whether it's personal projects or those challenges that are out there, that's going to be the thing that really takes it to the next level, because you get to define what your style is, or find the little things that are bugs, or just all of the little things that you won't run across or you don't know until trying to find a way to put it into application is I think the biggest thing to look for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think too, just like goes really well with what you shared, right? About like your experience of like, okay, I have this book on VBA, but I'm also actually trying to solve a real life business problem for sure.
Mm-hmm.
The other question I had for you is around, you mentioned kind of like this need for a process as well as a culture change, right? Especially in terms of the fact that like kind of twofold, right? Like one, executives are using Excel that may or may not be right. And then two, realizing like, okay, we have like a physical process that is breaking apart where things are going missing, or we don't actually know, if our inventory is right. Overall, I think that this maybe falls like under kind of this broader idea of like data governance even. And I'm curious because I get asked about it a lot. What is kind of your perspective in that in terms of how can you or how can we as like frontline analysts actually implement or advocate for a data governance process? What would your thoughts be on that?
I think the biggest thing to advocate for a data governance process is even just you go into an organization and it's, one of the first things you can ask them is, does everybody who's looking at, pick a dashboard, pick an Excel report, does everybody agree upon the definition of what you're looking at? A lot of the times it's no. And so that right there helps you drive your case of, we need to help define that. We need to help everyone understand that and start talking about, when I say, inventory accuracy, what do I actually mean? Because someone over here can think it means something completely different. Because if they're talking about what their data means, that's going to already kind of force them to be more fluent in their data, to understand it a little bit more. And I think also when I started using Tableau, I started immediately heading down that track of, if you're doing it in Excel, you're wrong. And I've humbled myself a lot to learn that just because somebody's doing an Excel or, wanting to see it in Excel doesn't necessarily make it wrong. I think there are ways that they could be more efficient, but it's also about meeting them where they're at. Like, what do they understand? Because even if Tableau or data visualization's goal is to help you understand information quicker, if somebody doesn't understand the technology and Excel is where they're at, you have to try to find some way to meet them where they're at and make it more efficient. And maybe eventually that translates into, now they're using Tableau and they see the value and they're picking up on it. But just really evaluating what is the problem you're trying to solve, and what's going to be the best way for you to understand that. And then I think the other thing too is, if you've got dashboards and people are still exporting them and doing something else with the data, you could say, oh, that's because they don't understand it or they just want to do their own thing. But I think the real takeaway there is, if that's what they're doing, then your dashboard didn't solve their problem and you need to go figure out why it didn't solve their problem. So I think it's just kind of changing the way that you look at, hey, I built this thing and it's the user experience is not what it was designed to be. Why is that? It's not always the user's fault. There's another element of, they don't understand it. It didn't solve the problem. It's not doing what they need it to do.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Jared. I obviously, I'm sure could think of a million more questions, but we'll be respectful of your time for today.
Yeah, no problem. Like I said.
Yeah, Jared. Yeah, thank you again. Everybody give Jared a virtual round of applause here. Thank you very much for sharing your time today. And we'll have you back soon again.
Yeah, always happy to do it.
All right.